It has been a rather tense minute in Captain's cabin on board of CLS Second Chance after Varuna told her boss about the unwanted deal she made with the Luddic priests. Seemed simple on paper, find some missing pilgrims, but nothing was ever easy, and that job would take them out of inhabited part of the sector, something that brought up bad memories both in Mr. Cart and his second-in-command. So, Varuna expected an entire tirade about it, but instead her boss was silent and she could almost hear gears turning in his head. "We're gonna need a tanker then," he finally said, turned around and got back to his command console. Varuna raised her eyebrow at that. "That's it?" she asked, surprised. "I thought you'd be angry about it. We basically got caught smuggling in broad daylight." "True. But this isn't the first time one of us screwed up, and it certainly won't be the last, so being angry about it won't change a thing. We have to play the cards we have, and being in good graces with the church will certainly be better than being in their crosshairs, which means we have a long-range mission to prepare. Let's get to it then and get that tanker." He flipped the comm switch, and a few seconds later, a channel opened between commanders of all ships. "Good day, lads and lasses. I have an operations update for you. We just scored a priority contract with the church." He threw a glance at Varuna, one that only she recognized under his helmet. "Now, we still have that delivery we have to make on high orbit to Coatl, so we'll do that first. And, as I said, I would appreciate it if you kept your crews blissfully unaware of this drop. Understood?" "Aye, we can do that, Chief," Zala said from mostly functional. Clearly, though, she didn't feel all that confident about it and added, "We're gonna get caught out there, though. There's tons of patrols around Coatl at all times." "Which is why it is good I just finished building us a little upgrade," Mr. Cart said, and even with his helmet in the way, everyone knew he was smiling. "An old blueprint we acquired from Tritachyon one day. Lads and lasses, I give you Signature Scrambler." With that, he flicked a blueprint onto the screen, and everyone saw an unpleasantly complicated and almost organic pile of cables, wires, and other machinery. Even on the plans themselves, it seemed to radiate heat. "This little baby scatters all of our outgoing signals, which should make us pretty much impossible to see on the sensors," Mr. Cart explained, as the blueprint slowly rotated on the screen. "Granted, it only has limited capability to mask our emissions, so it will work best when we go slow, but once we do, we'll be able to slip through pretty much any blockade." The eyes of Cart logistic captains glistened. This machine, this was something every smuggler in the sector would sell their own mother for. You could almost hear internal mathematics going on inside their heads. "Of course, before you all get a brilliant idea to grab it and run away, know that the bloody thing is quite literally tied to my ship. And trust me, you wouldn't be able to build it yourselves, even if you memorized the blueprint." With that, the plans disappeared from the screen. Zala sighed, shook her head and said, "Fair point. I had no idea what most of those numbers and letters meant anyway. Still, good to know we have far smaller chance of getting busted by patrols or bounty hunters." "True. But remember, the thing is not foolproof and we'll still have to be careful. But it should be enough to get us close to Coatl. After that, however, we'll have to deal with that church commission, and that means going out of the core systems into uninhabited space. I know what some people think about leaving the center, so I'm asking now. Any objections?" He stared into the screen for about 10 seconds in total silence and then said, "Good. They're not being paid to have objections anyway. Now, our ships can't carry enough fuel for the trip there and back again, so we'll have to find a tanker first. Hopefully we can get one on the way to Coatl. But other than that, we should be good. Now then, commanders, are we ready to do this?" Zala just nodded, and so did Varuna, while Mr. Cart looked at the new man in charge of CLS Temporary Setback. "You said an in-house?" "Aye, Chief," a weasel-like man said, with crooked smile on his face. "Been a while since I flew a brick like that, but it feels like home already. We can go anytime you want." "Understood. No problems with the crew?" "Some of them thought it would be funny to call me Full House. I cracked some skulls to remind them they're not being paid for being funny, and now the only thing they think about is work. So I say we're good." Mr. Cart said nothing. Technically speaking, Full House was not a wrong nickname, if a bit ironic one. The man was a former pirate and, just like Zala and Mr. Cart himself, had scars that reminded him of his previous life. But while former Pather was only missing an eye, and Mr. Cart's scars were more of a medical nature, House was a complete mess. He was missing an eye, arm and a leg, and overall the right side of his body was a tangled mess of mismatched machinery and life support systems, which he needed to meticulously maintain every day. It was also the reason he decided to leave piracy behind, as his body could no longer handle the stress of violent life. Still, he could act like a menacing pirate whenever he wanted, and the constant whirring and clacking of the machinery that kept him alive only made him more terrifying to behold. He also had some bizarre black market neural blocker implanted into his brain, which meant he never had to sleep, and all that combined made him a perfect choice for command. Plus, Mr. Cart had a very similar thing inside his own head, and it was always nice to have a common topic to talk about. But then, there was the other commander, Herr Ludwig of CLS Harmless. "They are also good, sir," he said with almost insane eagerness. "I mean, as good as in mentally prepared to go, not good as in actually physically ready for the journey. I believe we had some malfunction with the engines and we need to figure out how to patch it up. And, I suppose the engineers I sent outside to check it out must have encountered some issue, because they're taking very long." Varuna sighed. Zala rolled her eyes. Mr. Card wanted to say something diplomatic, but House and his honesty were faster. "They don't have an issue, you goddamn paper pusher. They're just ignoring you," he said and cracked his fingers. "They don't respect you for shit, boy, and I don't blame them. From what I heard, you were the one who caused that engine flame out in the first place." "Well, yes, but I thought we could save some fuel by..." "By what? Rerouting and overheating fuel lines? You no longer work for Traitor, you fucking human-shaped calculator. We do stuff differently here. Meaning, we don't think purely in terms of credit efficiency, or whatever corporate shit was coursing through your brain at the time. I know it's rich coming from a guy who was a pirate, but trust me, no amount of creds will help you when you're dead." Sweat appeared on Herr Ludwig's forehead and dripped onto his clothes. Somehow, even after a few weeks in space, he still wore his grey, featureless suit and tie, which made him look completely out of place. His face went red and he bowed, which meant his head was no longer on the screen. "I'm sorry. Right, I'm sorry. Just don't fire me, sir. I'll improve my ratings, I swear." "I am not Tritac executive, Herr Ludwig. You don't have to debase yourself in front of me," Mr. Cart said, patiently, as if he was talking to a child. "But you should listen to House. Your crew won't respect you if you'll treat them like they're cogs in a corporate machine. Yes, your ship efficiency skyrocketed since you took command, and I have to say I never saw numbers go so high on that model. But you can't expect people to work their asses off 24/7 without breaks. Understood?" "Yes, sir. I mean, I used to do just that, but... well, I will prepare a schedule to maximize efficiency and free time right away, sir." That would be a good start, I guess. Suppose we could go with a bit more organization in this fleet. So yes, you do that. And recall your engineers. I rebuilt my maintenance drone, so I'll send it to your ship to fix that engine. House, can you help Herr Ludwig make that schedule? You know, to offer some different perspective. Organic half of Pirate's face contorted in a twisted smile. His remaining eye flashed with pure, uncontained evil. "Oh, gladly, Chief. I'll show Mr. Corporate Man all the ropes I know, and then some." And then both men disconnected, but it was impossible to not see that Herr Ludwig's face went pale after House's statement. Zala giggled, but Varuna looked at her boss seriously. "Look, I generally don't question your appointments, but are you sure getting this Corp guy in charge of Harmless was a good idea? The guy's terrified of his own shadow and he has zero idea how to operate a ship." "That's true," Mr. Cat replied, "but he learned the mechanical stuff within a week, which is something I've never seen anyone do. Guess it's the corporate culture. You either adapt on the fly or you get fired and starve to death in the slums. And he's certainly not a coward, despite this scared-like way of talking. First, he's probably just used to constantly demean himself in front of the executives, so he learns to talk like he's afraid of them. And second, he left his entire life behind and gambled on something he had no idea about. Life as a spacer. For a man who spent most of his life behind the same desk, that takes guts.
If you say so, bossman. I just hope you won't panic if things go wrong, which they will, eventually.
We'll see about that. Hopefully House will beat some balls into him before that happens. Now then, Zala, you're last. You and your ship ready to go?
Always, Chief. Mostly functional is, well, mostly functional. Can't expect much from this old rust bucket, the former Pather replied.
True enough. In that case, everyone back to your posts. We have Stardust to grind. He turned off the comm, sat down at his personal command console, and ordered the fleet moving. Varuna left Mr. Cart's quarters and went back to the bridge, where she realized she had a call pending. Apparently, Sister Zala wanted to talk. Varuna gave some quick orders to the crew and decided to take this call in her personal quarters, just in case.
Ah, Lieutenant, glad you noticed my call request, Zala said as soon as Varuna opened the channel. Yeah, the green light is hard to miss. You need something? Aye, that I do, and I guess I like you enough to be honest about it. You had your reservations about Mr. Corporate Man. Well-funded reservations, let's be honest. The guy seems like a joke, but maybe our boss sees something in him we can't. But he's not the only officer in this fleet whose position I question. The other one is you.
Varuna was silent. She expected someone would try to contest her position, but not so openly.
What makes you say that, sister? She finally asked. Oh, don't act like you're surprised. Yes, girl, you may be as pretty as a holocard, and I admit, if I was a few years younger and not so jaded, I'd happily invite you over for a few drinks. And I know Mr. Cart likes you too, since you're the only person he allows inside his quarters, but whatever's going on between you two doesn't mean you get to be second in command. Sure, you talk big about your time in the Navy, but look at you. You're way too young to have any experience. So, you're either lying, which means you're an utter bastard, or the boss knows you're lying, which means he's a complete fool. I'd rather not serve under a complete fool, or with an utter bastard as his second in command. Varuna took a deep breath, trying to control the urge to be angry. Right now, she could take the shuttle, grab her knives and fly to Mostly Functional and show Zala what she thinks of her opinions. But that was just her old training talking, so she swallowed that anger. Understood, Zala, she finally said. Valid concerns, I have to say, but unfortunately they're wrong. I'm not going to give you my biography, if that's what you want, but I think your Luddic education makes you forget one very important thing. There's technology out there that can severely reduce effects of aging. Just take a look at the High Hegemon. He looks exactly the same today as he looked 40 years ago. True enough, but I'm sure such tech would be expensive to get. Way too expensive for a normal crew member, yes, but not for a second in command of an expanding logistics company. Look, everyone has their vices. This just happens to be mine. And as for experience, how old are you, Zala? 40? 50? 52, the Pather replied. Damn, then you hold pretty well yourself. But let me tell you this, there's really not that much difference between us, and let's leave it at that, shall we? Very well, Zala replied after a moment of silence. I'm not sure if I believe this story, but I guess I can give you the benefit of the doubt here. Now, let's get back to work then. And return to work they did, and for a while everything seemed to go according to their plans. The tanker turned out to be easy. On the way to Coatl, the company made a brief stop back at Nova Maxius, where one small fuel hauler was available for purchase in the docks. Sadly, Mr. Cart was so eager to get moving along that when he sent his floating drone for a remote trip before buying the ship, he missed a rather critical detail. Namely, the vessel had a faulty fuel injector. This would be problematic on any ship, as antimatter fuel pellets were notoriously unstable and dangerous, but on a vessel filled to the brim with said pellets, it could become catastrophic at a moment's notice. But, buyer's remorse or not, the purchase was already made, and the dealer no longer answered his comms, no doubt aware of the scam he pulled. And so the only thing to do was to hope everything would turn out okay, and that this malfunction won't cause trouble down the line. Still, almost no one wanted to serve on this ship. Only a handful of volunteers, mostly picked by House from amongst his less than pleasant associates.
And though these people were not exactly professionals, they had enough experience to run safety routines at least twice an hour, which unfortunately left them with very little time for sleep, which they offset a bit by downing copious amounts of stimulants. A bit of dark humor among them too, for they immediately decided to name their vessel CLS Master Exploder, as if tempting the fate to do its worst. Mr. Card did not object, but he also told them to keep their distance from the rest of the fleet. With the tanker done, the crew flew to Aztlan system to deliver a certain special package to the high orbit above Coatl. This time, however, despite flying in Hegemony Central, things were a lot easier. Mr. Card's signature jammer certainly lived up to the hype, as it made the fleet almost invisible to hostile sensors on approach. Granted, it were still tense few days. The ships had to move slow, and all it took was one overly enthusiastic hegemony officer to turn on active sensors, and all hell would break loose. But no such thing happened, and Card Logistics soon arrived at its destination, with most of its crew completely unaware of the nature of their mission. Some, however, knew what was going on, and about an hour before reaching their target, Mr. Card's personal comm suddenly pinged.
"House here, Chief,"
the former pirate said, sounding oddly serious.
"Look, I'm not gonna mince words. You sure you want to do this? You know just as well as I do what's in the crate we got. A spy satellite. And not just any kind, the kind that can disrupt comms and create dead zones for sensors. I know you said it's to signal smugglers that the coast is clear, but that's bullshit. They always drop those things before raids, so if you deploy this thing, people will die."
"And you care about that house?" Mr. Card asked.
"I don't give a shit, really, but I know some of our people do, even if not all of them have the balls to say it to your face. What I care about is trying to avoid attention. Now, most likely Hegemon's lapdogs won't ever find this thing, but on the off chance they do, they will start wondering where it bloody damn came from, and they're good at following trails, even if there's barely anything for them to follow. My old fleet learned of that the hard way."
"Understood," Mr. Card replied, and then his visor switched to blue, a color, as his crew eventually learned, he used to indicate that he was smiling. But they wouldn't worry about chasing us if this satellite was just a simple comm beacon, wouldn't they?
"Probably not, no. But that would require dismantling the bloody thing, and I saw these sats. They're made by some freak genius from Capitan and filled with advanced tech. You fiddle with them and they'll know. I heard stories of people who tried."
Lucky for us, we are not those people. And you're right, the satellite is full of top-tier tech, so much of it, in fact, that it's very susceptible to EMP bursts. Say, if someone detonated a small EMP charges at very specific points, they could fry all the more dangerous bits, while also scrambling the automated message array.
Which would mean the creators wouldn't get tipped off that it was being messed with, but then it'd still send them observation data, but they wouldn't be able to use it to scramble comms and sensors. Fuck me, Chief, that's some impressive tech work there. You have to tell me how you figured it out.
House sounded genuinely impressed. "I just like machines, House. Oh, and Herr Ludwig helped. Turns out he's good at calculating stuff, like precise amount of energy that has to be released to disable something without frying the whole thing to shit."
Ha! 1 point for the SatCorp drone. Guess I'll go easy on him during the training shift today.
"Don't. He's smart, yes, but he still needs discipline," Mr. Card replied out loud. In his head, however, he made a mental note to buy the poor Tritak official a beer one day, as thanks for his help. He doubted he could pull off this maneuver without him. Hour later, Varuna and a couple of the most trustworthy crewmen pushed an unmarked crate out of the cargo doors, where, mere seconds later, it completely vanished from the sensors. Good, Mr. Card thought. Means the cloaking works. Few hours later, an unmarked donation was made to Card Logistics' account. Good money, and without any drama, or so it seemed for now. Still, it meant that the business in Aztlan was done, and it was time for the long trip out of the core sector, something pretty much no one really looked forward to. You see, the problem with hyperspace was that it was certainly there, sort of layered over real space, but what little knowledge was available about it was mostly purely theoretical. The only thing that could be said for sure was that it felt weirder the farther you went from inhabited sector, and it seemed that everyone perceived it differently. There were ones like Sister Zala who talked of endless, dreadful silence out there, not just absence of sound, but as if someone put entire reality on mute. Those ones tended to speak in hushed whispers during hyperspace travels, as if afraid of breaking that silence. Others, like Dr. Disco, spoke of constant sound, as if a thunderstorm was raging outside, threatening to rip the flimsy ships to pieces at any time. Most learned to stop noticing it after a while, but some kept listening for louder sounds, expecting death and destruction at every moment. Or maybe they perceived hyperspace like Varuna did, as a source of constant, impossible-to-explain anxiety. She described a constant, never-ending droning sound that turned something in the primordial part of her brain, causing her to be constantly jumpy and afraid of her own shadow. There were a few like her, the hair on their necks always standing at attention and almost completely unable to sleep out there, always eager to return to reality as quickly as possible. Then, there were people like Herr Ludwig of CLS Harmless, who swore they heard voices coming from outside of their ships. For some, these voices were enticing and friendly, and some naive fools were known to walk out of the airlocks mid-transit, to vanish forever in the swirling nothingness outside. For others, though, the voices were far less pleasant. Screams, complaints, and grievances from the past, and, according to the most unfortunate, ones that sounded exactly like their own voices, begging to be let inside. So far, no one ever dared to open the airlocks for those voices, and the general procedure across the entire sector was to restrain the person hearing them, or even shoot them dead if necessary. Only a handful of people seemed unaffected by hyperspace weirdness, like Brother Jesselton, blessed with his ability to not be fazed by literally anything, but there were voices that these people simply pretended to appear superior in front of their crewmates. But then, at the very end of the spectrum was Mr. Cart, who seemed to relish every moment spent away from real space. "Sing for me," he said, every time the fleet pierced the boundary. And it sang. Oh yes, it sang. Although, if you were to ask Mr. Cart about it, he wouldn't really be able to say what the song was. All he knew was that it felt friendly, as if it cared for him. And considering that he flew across hyperspace great many times in his life and never suffered any accident, maybe indeed something out there guided him. Or maybe it was just experience with a bit of added mystique to appear more confident in front of the fleet. It was really hard to say. Most importantly though, it worked. While some of the crew of the Cart Logistics had indeed to be restrained, for their own safety of course, most did their best to ignore whatever weirdness they felt, and the fleet moved ever forward, though then again in hyperspace even things like forward were a bit meaningless. Let's just say they moved to their destination and leave it at that. Fortunately, the fleet reached its goal without any issues, except for some bizarre sensor readings that everyone, especially Brother Jesselton and other followers of Lud, tried to ignore. Aside from that though, the trip was surprisingly uneventful, and after less than a week away from reality, Cart Logistics approached the entry point to Thorax system and plunged itself back into real space. Now, they did this plenty of times back in the core systems, but it was never a pleasant thing, and only got worse the longer they spent in transit. Someone intelligent and educated, like Dr. Disco, would explain it by human brain slowly adapting to the weird nature of hyperspace, where space and time work differently. The longer you spend there, the more your brain adapted to it, but then, when it came back to real space, the collision with regular laws of physics was indeed quite painful. Of course, most people in Cart Logistics understood nothing from this explanation, except for the fact that Dr. Disco was some kind of big-mouthed poshed git, and so they all had their own explanations, which included ghosts, magic and Lud himself, punishing his followers by taking away their sensors. The end result was the same though. For a few seconds after returning to reality, everyone was dazed, as if hit in the head with a hammer. It was a perfect time for pirates or other hostiles to ambush the arriving ships, and so as soon as people woke up from their daze, everyone looked at the sensors expecting trouble. However, there were no pirates in Torak's system. Instead, there was something way, way worse.
Signatures detected. Frigate-sized mostly with lots of smaller ones,
Varuna said, her head still spinning.
But they don't match any... Wait, no. This can't be them.
Mr. Cat, however, had no doubts. "Remnants!" he shouted into the fleet-wide comm, and immediately everyone sobered up. "Fleet, go dark right now. If we're lucky they didn't see us." Chaos erupted on every bridge, as crews rushed to stations, turning off everything they could. Remnants, they thought. Everyone, well, almost everyone, heard about them, but it was one thing to hear ghost stories in some lonely pub, and another to actually witness them by themselves. Remnants. The autonomous, AI-controlled ships built years ago by Tritakian Corporation, responsible for millions upon millions of deaths during at least 2 wars. Officially, every government in the sector denied their existence, stating that they were all destroyed, but the stories kept circulating. Stories about entire fleets disappearing, with only scorched chunks of debris left behind. And, as it now turned out, these stories were real.
"Inferne machinarium,"
Brother Jesselton whispered.
"They exist. The shaitan really exists. Captain, sir, we have a duty to purge these abominations."
"Shut the fuck up, kid," Hal said from his ship, trying to keep his voice down, as if thinking that deranged rogue machines could hear him. "There's too many of them, and I don't fancy my chances here in a ship without shields."
"They're pinging us, Chief,"
Zala said, her ship already silent.
"We got dark till late. They know we're here. I'm picking up power fluctuations. They're powering up their weapons." "Can we jump back out?"
Varuna asked.
"Nope. We tried that and we'll fry nav systems. We'll have to try and outrun them. Everyone, prepare for emergency burn."
"Wait, not yet," Mr. Card said. "They're powering down. CLS harmless sent some kind of signal to them and they're powering down. Coltman, what the hell did you do?" Herr Ludwig's face appeared on the screen, sweaty and pale as usual, but with a hint of pride in his eyes.
"Sorry, sir. Apologies for acting without submitting request first, but the situation required initiative. I sent them my employee ID, sir. I no longer work for the corporation, but maybe the numbers still check out."
And as he said that, as if to reply, a voice message arrived from the automated ships. It was glitchy, but understandable enough.
"Greetings, employee F-037. Your corporate credentials are not adequate to request visit to the area. In order to preserve your efficiency as Tritakian employee, please remove yourself from the premises within next 5 standard minutes. If you want, you shall be removed manually, and a bill shall be sent to your next of kin. The Tritakian Corporation wishes you a nice day."
"Well, at least they gave us some time," Mr. Card said. "Good job, Herr Ludwig. All ships, we have a few minutes to disappear from their sensors. Power down everything and let's burn away from them. If we're lucky, we can vanish from their view and explore the place. We still have to find those pilgrims." And just as he finished saying that, something hit CLS Second Chance. Something small and soft. Varuna toggled external cameras, and, after a moment of fiddling, directed them at the offending object. What she saw was not pleasant. All around the jump point, space was littered with metallic debris, as if a massive explosion completely tore a bunch of ships apart. But metal wasn't the only thing floating out there. It took Varuna a second to understand what she was seeing. Tangled green robes, eyes bulging from vacuum exposure, pale, frozen skin. One of the poor bastards drifted into the path of Second Chance and was now splayed on top of it, his unseeing eyes staring into the endless void. Varuna picked up the comm again.
"Yeah, boss? About those pilgrims? I guess we just found them."